for the better, and everyone should have art in their lives that make them happy. And after leading some of the most cutting-edge galleries in the city for over 15 years, I decided to create my own virtual gallery to exhibit and work with the artists that I personally believe in. I want to tell their stories, and the incredible painter Ned Martin is one of the stories that I want to share with all of your viewers.
I mean, look at his, before you introduce Ned and tell us a little bit about him, I love Ned's background and your background. It's so artist. Like, you look at the two of you and it's like, oh, that's an artist. I love the quintessential, stereotypical in a good way look. So introduce Ned for us.
Absolutely. Well, I first met Ned Martin about 12, maybe 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was one of the best artists I've seen in a really long time. He was doing hyper-real landscapes, incredible figurative work, and we had to get through his first show. It was a gallery down in Tribeca on North Moore Street. Sold a few works, and since then I've done 2 more shows, and Ned was actually the first exhibition under the Robert Berry Gallery brand back in 2014.
Fantastic. All right, Ned. We're dying to learn about you, and then let's talk about the show. But, you know, everybody likes to know beginnings. Did you always know you were an artist? Did you have a gift early on? What was that all like? People love the journey part. So welcome.
Thanks, Ted. I really have a little aversion to that whole gift idea. I think people have talent or they don't have talent, but that's a very small part of it, actually. I think it has a lot to do with work ethic and doing things despite all the odds and stuff like that. So I have a little problem with that whole idea, the whole notion about, you know, magically waking up one day and you can do all this stuff. You know?
So it was a journey for you, but did you have an interest in art at an early age?
Yeah, it's just the one thing that worked for me. You know, Mrs. Cole in 4th grade came by and said, "Ooh, that's amazing. What is that? You know." Blah, blah, blah. And I did this clay thing out of Abe Lincoln sitting on a log or something. Oh, that's great. You know, when it came to math and history and the rest of it, it was like, yeah. So. And I had a bit of a tough childhood, so I really kind of found my way through art because it was gratifying. And by the time I got to high school, you know, I had kind of a reputation, and people asked me to do stuff for them, and it kind of found me.
How do you find your style along the way? You know, you talked about the Abe Lincoln clay guy. How do you develop what you know? And Robert, before we went live, was talking about a specific style. And when I was listening to him describe you, I'm like, okay, I've heard all of those words. I'm going to look them up later. But there's so many styles of art. There's so many ways to describe it. How did you find your particular art technique or art passion?
It sounds a little trite, but I it's by accident and trial and error. But you know, I personally have an aversion to brushstroke for some reason, and I really don't know why. But when I see an obvious brushstroke, I have to go in and scratch through it, and so I do a lot of scraping and. Is either with cut up credit cards or pieces of metal or pieces of plastic, hard plastic or something, or a stick even, and I'll scratch through everything that I've just put down. And that's part of, I think, an influence by people like N.C. Wyatt or Andrew Wyatt, and you know, that's part of the development of style, is because you get influence.
And how do you get it inspired? What is it? I have a lot of musical guests on too, and I'm always fascinated by the story of what inspires you for a piece of work. For them, what inspires a song, the lyrics, what inspires your art? Is it personal experience, something you see and observe? Where does your inspiration come from?
Life. I lost my mother and my sister at the beginning of this year.
Sorry.
I think in part that was what I was trying to say with this show. It was about women and what they meant to me, what they do mean. So, sorry, don't want to get all.
I love it. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think people, I was telling Robert earlier that you can sort of see my early purchases of art back behind me. And so I think as you begin to understand art, the more that you can understand maybe the story or the inspiration and where the artist was going or what moved them or what their journey was, the more that the piece speaks to you. And so I love to hear about the journey. So thank you for sharing that.
My mother was a single mother. She had a very tough time as well. My parents got divorced when they were 4, so that's part of that ugly childhood thing. And my brothers were older, so I couldn't relate to them very well. But my sister and my aunt, my mother, were very, very important to me. And that was part of what this series is about. It's about honoring women. I got stuck in Bolivia during the COVID crisis.
Wow.
I went over there for a week and a half and ended up getting stuck there and stayed nearly 6 months.
Holy moly. How do you adapt to that? Well,
that was the cool part, because I've had controversy and trials, a lot of stuff, a lot of challenges through life. And what I've found mostly is I withdraw. And I find it very comforting, honestly. I was lucky enough through my girlfriend to hook me up with this beautiful apartment that was empty, and it was getting renovated. And it has a beautiful view of the city in Santa Cruz. And I was up there by myself. And what I didn't have was a couple of things. I didn't have galleries telling me what to paint and what not to paint. So it took me about 6.5 weeks to kind of mutter through all these explorations that I was having emotionally and whatnot. And I came upon this women thing, and it was about honoring women. I also didn't have anything to paint on, so there were all these kitchen cabinets were being torn down. So I ended up having a lot of painting panels that I ripped from there, and it just made things work,
That's so cool.
So it was challenging. And it was not a happy scene there, because everything else around us, they were literally the military out in the streets checking your IDs and saying you can't go out. We literally were on very strict lockdown.
Did you get stir crazy? Did that help with the creativity? I would imagine that when you're in your thoughts all by yourself for that long, you start to think some crazy things like we all have during COVID.
Well, but I'm a little claustrophobic, so I found that a little uneasy. But again, I really think it helped the situation. It's just like any other situation where if somebody dies, you find somehow not just strength, but inspiration from it. And it's powerful, very powerful.
So tell us about the show. Tell us about the exhibit. Do we call it a show or an exhibit, Robert? What do we call it?
Well, I guess in today's age, either are appropriate. We can go with the classic exhibition, if that's okay with you, Ted.
I love it. So tell us about the exhibition. I know that each piece is your baby. These are things that you have birthed, that you have created. And so how do you how do you help? How do you curate? How do you decide what goes into a show? What is that process like? Because it's not like you just pull arbitrary paintings. It has to make sense. There's a theme, spirits through time. So you really have to know what you want in the show to make it flow as a creative.
Well, I guess the history of the exhibition goes back 12 or 13 years when I first met Ned. And we did a show back in 2014 on the west side of Manhattan, and it was mostly an abstract painting show. And he changed his technique from more realistic things, and he actually started using these aluminum printing plates that were mounted onto panel. So you had some commercial advertising, newspaper-like ads, and that started to be visible in the abstract paintings. And so when Ned flew down after maybe a month or so, he called me randomly because I hadn't heard from him. And he's like, "I'm still in Bolivia, Robert." And I told him, the first thing I said is, "Are you painting?" And he said, "Yes." And so he told me the story that he was set up in an apartment and there was these wooden panels, cabinets, and he basically pulled them off the wall and was able to start painting on them. So it was something, it was practical, and it was also that he could bring them back to New York when he could easily. And so mostly for the current show, it goes back as well to the fall when he started this new body of more landscape-inspired paintings that were bolder, more colorful, and they combined the hyper-real landscape works with a lot of the bold, abstract, and colorful things. And so that side of the show started about a year ago, and the figurative work is more new. And it seems to me that they're more inspired by 19th century European figurative work. And more importantly, there's a lot of Egyptian references, which I really find exciting, that it's a little bit classical, it's a little bit modern, and there's a lot going on.
What do you think of that description, Ned?
I'm just going to let you guys talk.
Isn't it great when somebody can just describe it for you? I love it.
Yes, thank you.
I was mesmerized. I'm like, oh, that's good. Okay, so we're done. That was fantastic.
I want to meet that guy. I want to see
what I think a lot of people don't understand is how you're doing the show. So you mentioned it a little bit before. So talk about how this works when you have a virtual show, a virtual exhibition.
Absolutely. Well, what we're doing is you asked the question of the curation, so I apologize for not answering that.
No.
So
I asked a lot of questions. You pick what you want to answer. It's fine.
So it was finding those best landscape pieces from the fall and early spring. And then when Ned was working on the new figurative works, I told him, make the best painting you can ever make. And before the show opened, probably about maybe a week before the show opened, we started going through the works together. We really liked these, I believe, 7 landscape paintings we chose, and there was 8 figurative paintings that we decided worked well as one cohesive unit. So we took the landscape works, and we now virtually installed those into a big gallery. So you can basically see the works as we would hang them in person if it wasn't for COVID. And for the landscape works, we put them in an even bigger museum quality room that really showcases what Ned can do and how these works should be viewed and appreciated.
I think that people, and what do they do? Do they just go to, and I know I'm going to ask this later and reiterate it, but I want to make sure people can just go to the website and follow the link. Is that how it works?
Exactly. Anyone watching the show now or after can go to robertberrygallery.com and see Ned's current show, Spirits Through Time, and all of the great roster of artists we put together.
So Spirits Through Time, why that title?
Well, it has go back to the influence of the women. And once I started thinking about painting women, and I arrived after that 6 weeks of kind of floundering around and a lot of false starts, I didn't have a model. So I went through the internet and I started looking at women, and I ended up choosing women from the 1800s. And these people just suddenly became very important to me, these faces. And I'm realizing, you know, they're all gone too. And I felt like if I could just honor them and bring them back, not just to current day, but maybe into the future, that would be also a good thing. You know, I feel like it's powerful.
I love that. You're giving them a voice from a long time ago. And also, I find it fascinating when I always want to know the story when I see an old photograph or an old picture. I want to know what's going on, what's their back, because these people were living, breathing human beings at one time. And I'm just fascinated by what their lives would be or what their stories were and what led up to, especially photography back then. It wasn't inexpensive to have pictures taken. And so when you're looking at people from the 1800s, especially, I just want to know what their story is. So I loved that about your description of the show. Ned, where can people reach you? If they want to learn more about you, they want to learn more about your art. We want you to buy art. I'm going to say that. We want you to go and virtually visit the exhibition. So what's the best way for them to reach you, Ned, first?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One, the obvious way is to go through Robert Berry Galleries. I like having these kind of partnerships with galleries because Robert does a hell of a job doing a lot of things that I'm not good at, frankly.
Right.
I'd rather just paint. And I'd rather defer, not because I'm schmoozing up to Robert at the second, but I'm saying that he earns his money. He makes money from me. I make money from him. And I think it's an important partnership. So I advocate galleries a lot. And Robert's been in the business. We've had a long-term relationship and everything's been great. So the other thing obviously is to go to my website, which is Ned Martin Art. And that's my handle on all social media as well.
We found you. All right, Robert, wrap it up for us. Tell us again how we can see the exhibit, how we can learn more about Robert Berry Gallery and Ned Martin Art through you.
Of course. Well, lastly, just want to say thank you so much for having me back on the show, Ted. And I'm glad.
Anytime. Bring all these talented, amazing human beings. I could listen to somebody talk about their art and their passion for hours, days. So thank you.
My pleasure. And my PR person, Deborah Geiger, the best PR person in all the world.
She's amazing.
We'll be in touch with you soon. And so everyone watching can go to robertberrygallery.com to see Ned's new show, Spirits Through Time. It's open until the November 29th. But if anyone has any questions about the show or wants to inquire on any of the paintings, please feel free to reach out, call, email. I would love to speak with you.
Guys, this is a great way. I'm talking to my audience now, or our audiences. This is a great way for you to experience it and learn about it at your own pace and your own speed, and to really get to know an artist. We've all adapted to the virtual world. This is a great way for you to learn about something without, a lot of people have told me, especially before we go live, anything to do with art. I'm intimidated, Ted. Don't be intimidated. These guys are amazing. They're professionals. They want you to experience the joy of however it moves you, the painting, and they want you to be educated about art. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Ned. robertberrygallery.com, nedmartinart.com. Thank you, Deborah. And we'll be back later. You guys have fun. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.